The Age of Shinobi is over, and I'll send you where I sent the 7th. These two lines have spawned so many theories about Boruto's true ending, and for good reason. Why does Kawaki want to end the Age of Shinobi? And how does getting rid of Boruto allow that to happen? Well, it all goes back to Shibai Otsutuki and his plan to save the timeline.
This story begins several years earlier.
You see, there have been so many videos about Shibai's true identity. Some believe that he's Momoshiki in disguise, some believe that he's a model, some even believe that he's just a random background character influencing the events of Boruto's timeline. All of these theories are indeed plausible, but there's one that stands out. In fact, I've made videos in the past about this very thing, which is Boruto himself being Shibai. Now you guys might be saying, if I've made videos on this already, what's the purpose of this one? Well, the answer to that question is that I've made a new discovery. You see, the difference between that theory and this one is the very foundation it was built on, which is that Boruto is Shibai's reincarnate. So in a sense, he's the continuation of someone that existed in the past, his next life per se. While this new theory takes on a different approach, in that Boruto isn't Shibai's reincarnate. He is and always was Shibai himself. Now, this might seem a bit confusing, but let me explain. You see, there's this concept in time travel known as a causal loop or the bootstrap paradox. This is in essence a situation in which an object or piece of information is sent back in time and becomes the cause of its own existence, creating a closed loop. Essentially, there's no clear origin for the item itself. It appears to have always existed because it is a part of a self-perpetuating cycle. In fact, something similar to this has happened in the Boruto universe, which I've mentioned before in prior videos. This took place when Boruto and Sasuke traveled back in time. The younger version of Denki's father, the creator of the train system in the future, overheard Boruto talking about a train system that hadn't yet existed, which inspired him to then create said train system. The future version of himself later attributes the idea for the train system to the random kid he interacted with years prior. That of course being the kid Boruto who traveled to the past. That itself is the bootstrap paradox, since if Boruto learned about it because Denki's father created it, and Denki's father created it because he overheard Boruto talking about it, there's no clear origin to the train system. It's a closed causal loop. It's a paradox. Now this gets even crazier when you apply it to Shibai, and it all goes back to a constant theme in the Boruto anime, which is that it tends to foreshadow later events of the manga. Whether it's Kagemasa's evil eye, a clear reference to Boruto's Jogan, Harami's introduction which had him encased in a Jogan-shaped container with a scar above his right eye, which of course foreshadows the scar Boruto later receives in the manga, and even the clones Shin created that he viewed as tools, but in the end turned against him, similar to Code's situation with the Clog Rhymes and the Shinju. There are many such cases where the anime hints towards later plotlines, and this bootstrap paradox is no different. But precisely how does it apply to Boruto and Shibai? Well, I believe that current Boruto will eventually become Shibai after evolving into his new Otsutsuki form. He will then travel to the past and become the Shibai known throughout history, thus ensuring the continued existence of the timeline. Now you guys might be saying this doesn't make sense because why would Boruto need to become the Shibai of the past when Shibai existed long before Boruto was born? And you guys would be 100% correct in saying that. But that's why it's a paradox. Boruto was always destined to become Shibai and travel to the past to ensure his future. He is the catalyst that spawned the events which led to the present, and without him the timeline would cease to exist. So he must adhere to his destiny and complete the loop. This is of course the ultimate enemy Boruto faces as decreed by Toneri in the anime, Destiny. Destiny was always his true opponent, something he can't overcome with brute force and must shoulder by himself. Now how does this tie into Kawaki? I did say this explains the Age of Shinobi is overlined in chapter 1, but how? Well, it all goes back to what happens to a timeline if a closed loop is broken. In this case, it could either result in a new timeline where things are different, or it could result in the timeline's total destruction. Now to understand the full weight behind Boruto's decision, I want to explain in detail what I believe will happen. So sometime in the future, everyone comes to learn of this decision Boruto must make. Either continue on the path to evolution or destroy the loop. If Boruto chooses to evolve, he must travel to the past to ensure the loop cycle continues. He does this by taking the name Shibai, which by the way means playing a role. So Boruto plays the role of Shibai by first infiltrating the home of the Otsutuki, and after building rank among them, he later directs them to Earth's sector, which is what led to Kaguya and Ishiki's arrival in the first place. This ensures that the timeline which created the Shinobi system is born, which also ensures Boruto's birth. The sad part is that he's still Boruto, but he can't live a normal life. He can only watch from afar as to not tamper with the timeline. So he becomes sad and lonely, which is why he discards his body and ascends to a higher plane of existence. The crazy part about this is that he did this under the guise of ascending to godhood through the consumption of chakra fruits, and left instructions to the Otsutsuki for them to do the same thing. So the reason why the Otsutsuki consume planets to gather chakra fruits is because Boruto, who's now Shibai, told them how to do it. He didn't just tell them the location of the planet, he gave them a reason to go there. That's because for the events of Boruto to happen, Kaguya, Momoshiki, and Ishiki must arrive on the planet in search of said chakra fruit. So those chain of events only occur if Boruto travels back in time to be the catalyst, thus ensuring the never-ending cycle. So Boruto has a very big decision to make, ensuring the timeline plays out as it always has, despite knowing that he'll be damned to a miserable life, or break the loop and risk erasing all his loved ones from existence. Very tough. Now, where Kawaki comes in is actually very simple. You see, we know Kawaki hates the Shinobi system. He thinks they're weak fodder that simply die on the front lines. He suffered in poverty because of that very system as well, which makes this very personal. He also despises the Otsutsuki because all they've ever brought is destruction and suffering. Whether it's for him or the people he cares about, it's all the same. What this means is that it's in Kawaki's best interest to stop Boruto from fulfilling his destiny. If he succeeds, the Otsutsuki as we know it would cease to exist, since Boruto never went back in time to give them their mission of collecting fruits. The Shinobi system also wouldn't exist since it was spawned from Kaguya's arrival and Hagoromo giving chakra to humans. So stopping Boruto fulfills Kawaki's goals that were established in part 1, ending the Age of Shinobi and ending the reign of the Otsutsuki, at least as we know it. And he does this by sending Boruto where he sent the 7th, which of course is a dimension where time doesn't flow. So since Boruto is in a dimension where time doesn't flow, he can't influence time, nor will he ever evolve to the point where he could. Now one could say, why doesn't Kawaki just kill Boruto to ensure that this never happens? Well, that could be because he simply grows to care about him and would rather seal him away. Or it could also be the case that he can't be killed. You see, if Boruto is truly essential to completing the loop, meaning the entire timeline depends on him becoming Shibai and going back in time, then yes, the timeline would certainly protect him to preserve itself. This could manifest in attacks on Boruto always being interrupted by someone or something, an ally arriving just in time as seen with Kawaki, or an enemy being distracted by another conveniently pressing matter, as seen when Jiro left to go revive Hidari, which he himself attributed to Boruto being protected by divine intervention. Some believe that this is Shibai now actively influencing these events from a higher plane of existence, but that isn't the case. The truth is that the timeline itself is protecting Boruto because without him, it would cease to exist. So Kawaki must find a loophole around killing Boruto because that action itself is blocked by fate, which of course leaves us with Daikokuten, a dimension where time doesn't flow. So in essence, if Boruto is removed from time itself, it can no longer protect him, which means he could end Boruto in that time space. This ensures that all the things that Kawaki hates about this world never occurs, and he's willing to end everything if there's even a small chance that Naruto might get to live in a world absent of these threats. The problem, of course, is that the chance is very small. Yes, breaking a causal loop could result in the history being rewritten to where the events caused by that loop didn't occur, So Earth would just be a normal planet with no superpowered humans or god trees and the Otsutuki. Just the normal strife between mankind, which I'm sure Kawaki is aware of, but deems preferable to what they have now. The flip side of this is the total destruction of the timeline itself, and everyone simply ceases to exist because it becomes too unstable, which actually is more likely. Boruto doesn't want to take that risk, but Kawaki does, which is what leads to that conflict. At this point, everything should start to make sense. Boruto is a star of hope against the destruction that will eventually come to pass, as stated by Toneri. And Kawaki, of course, is the apostle of destruction, as stated in the Boruto database, because his actions would result in the destruction of the timeline. So Boruto's real opponent is destiny, because if he doesn't find a way to change it without the destruction of the timeline, he's bound to a miserable existence. So playing the role of Shibai, the past, the present, the future, it's all interconnected, which is crazy. But you know what's also crazy? Only 22% of you guys subscribing to the channel, and only 2 of you currently being a member. Shoutouts to Iki and Christian, by the way. In any case, if you guys are enjoying the videos, consider supporting the channel so I can continue to, make them. With that said, let's get back to the video. Now, given what I said before, it all makes sense why Boruto's horn looks like Shibai despite receiving his karma from Momoshiki. It isn't because he's a descendant of Shibai or because he received Shibai's cells. No, it's because Boruto had Otsutuki DNA prior to receiving Momoshiki's karma, since he's a descendant of Kaguya. So that data mixed with Momoshiki's and Kinshiki's, thus creating a brand new horn with elements of all of that data. So Boruto doesn't have that horn because of Shibai. Shibai has that horn because of Boruto, because Boruto becomes Shibai. At this point in time, his evolution into Shibai has already begun. That's why he hasn't heard from Momoshiki in over 2 years, and why he can't use the karma seal without losing himself. They're slowly merging into one entity, which began with their brainwaves crossing over. And once this process is complete, a new evolution will occur, thus the birth of Shibai. Now, you might be wondering why this happens. Why will Momoshiki merge with Boruto and create this new form? Well, that part is actually quite simple. It all goes back to Boruto himself being part Otsutsuki and strongly inheriting their power. We have to remember that Momoshiki evolved to this state after consuming Kinshiki and merging his essence with him. A similar process is taking place with Momoshiki and Boruto, because you have Boruto's innate Otsutsuki essence merging with Momoshiki's, which will in the end result in the creation of a new form. This form might be controlled by Boruto's consciousness, or might be a completely different person, who is the result of both personalities of Momoshiki and Boruto merging into one. With that said, this also explains some other similarities as well. Some have pointed out that the ability Shibai uses in this panel looks similar to Rasengan Uzuhigo. Well, that's because it is Rasengan Uzuhigo, since Boruto is Shibai. Some have pointed out that the damage to Shibai's clothing on his right hand looks very similar to the damage to Boruto's clothing in the flash forward scene. And that, I believe, is because it is after this fight that Boruto evolves into this new form. It would also rip apart his pants, which explains the tattered look from the back, but of course I could be reaching there and it's not really that relevant to the overall theory. By the way, I also noticed that this garment is somewhat different from this one in this panel, because this one is ripped apart and this one isn't. Which could imply that this one is from when he just transformed and this one is after he went back into the past, and that would make sense since this one was used to explain how he ascended, which we know happens in the past, not the future. I also think that this panel being a future event implies that Jura will succeed in cultivating the divine tree, likely using Akebi as the Otsutsuki substitute. And Boruto of course will gain the power to stop it after evolving, which could be a part of the entire closed loop. So Boruto must evolve into Shibai to save the planet, and must also go back in time to ensure that all the events play out as they should, so that this moment happens. It's kinda crazy. Now finally, there's also the Jogan and its connection to Ada and Damon. I've always said that it's strange how Ada's Senrigan is a crescent moon and Damon has a half moon, and of course Boruto's Jogan is a full moon, which led me to believe that Amado was trying to recreate the Jogan. And then of course when we saw Shibai for the first time, that then changed to Shibai has the Jogan, and Ada and Damon's dojutsu are simply pieces of the puzzle because of course they have Shibai's cells. Now that is still partly true, but it makes more sense now that we know Boruto is Shibai and he left his body where it would be discovered so that Ada and Damon would be able to receive his cells. The same for Kashin Koji, who now has prescience because of Shibai's cells, and he's using that power to help Boruto in his journey to becoming Shibai. What this means is that Boruto in the future will have the power to use the Senringan, Damon's reflection, prescience, and omnipotence all by himself, which is likely how Boruto will reverse the effects of omnipotence. In fact, we've seen Boruto use a Senringan-esque ability with the Jogan in part 1, when he was able to see and hear what Shikadai was saying from another dimension, which is the Nue dimension by the way, which is something Ada can do with her dojutsu. So again, the anime is just rich with foreshadowing, and I'm sure I could find more if I watched all of it, but I don't think I will. With that said, that is it for the video. If you guys liked it, drop a like, and also if you guys want to learn more about Boruto's connection to the Matrix and how it might predict the ending of Boruto, check out the video on screen.